We live in a twilight world. Let's do a very quick recording. I've got a coffee here, so if you hear me slurping or burping, you know why. So today we're going to be talking about Vladimir Putin. Yeah, and it's quite well known, it's quite common knowledge that Vladimir Putin was put in by MI6. Yeah, put in the position of power by MI6. MI6 instigated, put energy towards, manipulated things so that he became the president of the Federation of Russia. Now, how was this done? Well, we're going to talk about that. So, and this is going to be a very quick recording, yeah? So, I'm only going to give you a very brief outline of how I remember it. Yeah, it's all off the top of my head. So it's up to you if you want to go do like a deeper research and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be very superficial. It's just going to be the main points in regards to our reality being triggered, manipulated by illusion and theatre and opera. We are living in the age of opera. The op era of operations. I'm mainly talking about illusion operations as a way to trigger the butterfly effect. Anyway, so the Soviet Union fell in 1991. Just as a side note, 1 + 9 + 9 + 1 is 20. 20 is XX. Yeah, so there's your double cross. Yeltsin. Is it Boris Yeltsin? He becomes the president. Yeah, he beats the Communist Party and becomes the president. And he makes Putin the prime minister, like the caretaker prime minister. And he's known as like the strong man of Russia because he's dealing with all of the oligarchs and the corrupt bankers and gangsters and all that kind of stuff. He's the one that supposedly put them in their place. Yeah, he basically said to these crooks, keep what you stole, but from this day on, do not get involved in politics, yeah? Of course, MI6 loved this. Yeah, that's why MI6 wanted this guy to be the future president. But interesting, his name's Putin, and he was put in by MI6, right? Once again, it's almost like the script writers of reality are taking the piss out of all of us, slapping us around the face with little things like this that tell us we are living in a giant theatrical movie production and that the world is a stage and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, yeah, so once the Iron Curtain fell, as a gesture of goodwill, the KGB and MI6 started working together, and they've done stuff like 100 KGB guys will go over to London, 100 MI6 guys would go over to Moscow. They would share intelligence, always a gesture of goodwill, a gesture of good faith to show that there's no hostilities. You can see what we had, what we've got, I'll show you yours if you show me mine, and so on. There are people running around and they've got books out and that say that of those 100 KGB guys, Putin was one of them. Is that true or not? I don't know. It probably sounds true. Don't forget, Leon Trotsky was trained over here in London. And most importantly, Karl Marx was trained over here in London. And Karl Marx is also buried in London. And for people that don't know, Karl Marx is the guy that sort of supposedly dreamt up communism, but he never. The idea of communism started in England after the Civil War. It's called English socialism. Communism is a very English concept, and it was tested out in Russia via their agents, such as Karl Marx. Marxist communists. Yeah. So, where was we? So yeah, MI6 and KGB were working together. So around the year 2000, new elections are coming up. Many people have thrown their hat in the ring. But the KGB and MI6 want Putin in. Yeah, they want Putin to win. So what they do is they get the head vampire here, Tony Blair, to fly over and meet with him personally, like days before the elections or in the lead up to the elections. I don't know how far apart. But the point is, he's the first Western leader to go over to Russia and start, rubbing shoulders. And he could have went and met all of them, all of the potential candidates, but instead he just went and met Putin. And of course, where was one of their main meeting points, or what was shown to the world, was of course them meeting in the Mariinsky Theater as they watched the opera. Now this action alone, this theatrical performance of the Prime Minister of Britain directly flying over to St. Petersburg and meeting this guy, Putin, sent a message to the world, and especially to the Russian people, that Putin was going to be like a more Western-style leader. Open to capitalism, liberal democracy, all this kind of good stuff. Which is probably great for the Russian people who had been living under the Soviet Union for so long and under extreme socialism. Yeah, the USSR is the United Soviet Socialist Republics, yeah? Many people would say there's never really been a communist country. Like the S in the USSR is socialist, so I don't know. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, that's how MI6 made Putin a more popular person in the eyes of the world, and especially Russia. They sent head vampire Tony Blair over to go and rub shoulders with him at the theatre, of all places. Now, what are the odds that it happened at the theatre whilst watching the opera? Let's take a look at a few more slides. There's a picture of them again, sitting next to each other. I don't know what this event is, but it was all on that same day, yeah? It was like a whole day of activities. The theatre being the final one, the final events. So anyway, yeah, Putin got put into power. He got elected. And then he was the first Russian politician to be invited over to 10 Downing Street for something like 200 years. And he got, he got the whole VIP treatment and stuff. So yeah, man, they got their guy. They put in Putin. And what's another weird thing is that, Putin and Yeltsin before him used to sit in on NATO meetings. Ain't that crazy? NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it was set up as a defensive organization against the USSR. And now the presidents of the Russian Federation are actually meeting up with NATO leaders and talking about actions and stuff. But anyway, here's a screenshot I took from the official Kremlin website, President of Russia, Kremlin website. And here's the picture. Prime Minister of Great Britain sitting next to Putin before he's even been elected. Yeah? And what you can see here, for those with the eyes of an eagle, the date. Yeah? The 11th of March. That, of course, is a 33 encoded. March being the third month of the year. 11-3. 33. Or if you're in America, you do it 3/11. Let's read what it says here. Vladimir Putin with his wife, Ludmilla, and British Prime Minister Tony Blair with his wife, Cherie, at the premiere of the War and Peace opera. Now, isn't it interesting that MI6 put in Vladimir Putin, yeah, by this whole theatrical performance of sending Tony Blair to St. Petersburg to sit next to him in the theatre, watching an opera called War and Peace, and then all these years later, 20 years later, Putin invades Ukraine and kicks off the whole World War 33 narrative. He's now the boogeyman starting wars. They're in the theatre watching War and Peace opera. He then becomes the leader who starts a war. MI6 puts him in. You get what I'm saying here? You know, this further adds evidence to my whole concept that it is all theatre. Theatre and deception is being used to manipulate us, the humans, and they're using the power of theatricality and deception, illusion, to deceive and trick us into manifesting reality. Because I'm sure those elections, I'm sure the vast majority of people did vote for Putin after seeing this. After seeing these images of head vampire Tony Blair sitting next to Putin at the theatre. You know, it probably subconsciously signaled to them that if we choose this guy, we're going to have a more Western style democracy and way of life. We can own more than one pair of shoes. We can own more than one car. We're not going to be living in a socialist hellscape like the USSR. Let's check out another screenshot. We're going to wrap up quickly. Once again, this is from the President of Russia, Kremlin website. Go and check for yourselves. The meeting between Vladimir Putin and Tony Blair began at the Astoria Hotel in St. Petersburg and continued in Peterhof. The leaders exchanged opinions on a wide range of bilateral cooperation and global issues, in particular touching upon further development of the Russian-British trade and economic relations, fighting global terrorism, including the North Caucasus, and on the situation in Central Asia and the Balkans. So that would have been, the Balkans would have been Yugoslavia breaking up, you know, Croatia wanting independence, Bosnia, and Bosnia, what's the other one? Bosnia, Kosovo. Yeah, Albanians, Muslims, blah, blah, blah. Yugoslavia, that's another thing I need to talk about at some point in the future, but we won't do that today. After the meeting, the leaders made a statement for the media. Upon return to St. Petersburg, Mr. Putin and Mr. Blair and their spouses visited the Hermitage Museum and attended the opening night of Sergei Prokofyev's War and Peace opera at the Mariinsky Theatre. Isn't that crazy? Do you know what I mean? You couldn't make this shit up, yeah? So anyway, that's it for this recording, you know. It's all theatre. We are living in the op era. The era of operations, specifically illusion operations. The purpose of the illusion is to manifest a real response. Yeah, it's all about triggering the butterfly effect. And using theatre, theatricality and deception to manipulate us, the humans, into going in the direction that these vampires want. By the way, I don't really mind Putin. Just as a side note, like, whenever I've listened to a Putin speech, he sounds pretty reasonable. Like, he's saying reasonable things about prioritizing family, having a more honest economy based on, you know, real things like oil and gas, instead of it being inflated by social media likes and stuff like that. I do agree what he says about the Western world is quite satanic in that it kind of things like OnlyFans and shit like this is destroying the West. It's interesting, right? Because when the war in Ukraine started, Joe Biden was the president of the USA, and every time Biden spoke, it was pure gibberish, the ramblings of a madman. Yet the media would make out he was a prophet, poet, blessed being of holy light that was talking sense. Yet whenever Putin came out and said something very reasonable and straightforward, they made out he was a madman. He was the devil incarnate. Yet again, that's just double-crossing us, isn't it? It creates the drama. It creates the opera. Politics, of course, being a giant soap opera. Yeah, you will never know the faces and names of the people that are really running your country, that are really running your nation, that are really running your economy. Those guys hide in the shadows. True power hides in the shadows. We live in a twilight world. There are no friends at dusk.